Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight we're drifting off to the gentle sounds of strained breathing, whispered prayers, and the occasional panicked scream from behind a linen curtain. That's right, we're talking about childbirth in medieval Europe. Not the sanitised, candlelit kind you've seen in costume dramas. No, this is the version where you're surrounded by sweating women. The air smells like boiled rags and fear, and someone's rubbing mouldy herbs on your stomach while muttering about moon phases. It's intimate, it's holy, and it might kill you. So before the labour pains kick in, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. But only if drifting off to stories of historical nightmares is your kind of thing. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I like knowing who else is lying awake contemplating the past. Now close your eyes, take a breath, and settle in. Because tonight, you're pregnant. And things are about to get very medieval. You miss your bleeding. Not that it's a regular thing to begin with. Sometimes it comes like clockwork. Sometimes like a drunk rooster. But now it's been too long. Long enough for the midwife to notice the shift in your skin, the puffiness in your ankles, and the quiet dread in your eyes. You don't tell anyone at first, not because it's a secret, but because saying it out loud makes it more real. Instead, you wait, you hope, you pray, not for a baby, but for it to be anything else. A fever, a bad turn of the humours, anything but this. You've known women who didn't survive pregnancy. Everyone has. It's not whispered or hidden, it's expected. Death in childbirth is like death in war, except it comes with fewer songs and no heroics. Just torn sheets and candle smoke. You remember a cousin who bled out before the priest arrived. A neighbour who carried twins and never got back up again. Even your own mother, who bore you with a scream and then didn't speak for 3 days. When they say motherhood is sacred, what they mean is that it comes with a body count. But when the signs are undeniable, the nausea, the heaviness, the strange tension in your belly like something coiled inside you, the women around you start to celebrate. They smile, they call it a blessing. They pat your hand and say things like, strong hips just like your mother, as if having the same pelvis as someone who barely lived through childbirth is somehow comforting. Your husband grins like he's the one who's going to carry this thing for the next 9 months. He's pleased with himself. You feel like vomiting. The midwife confirms it with the oldest test known to woman. She looks at your face, that's it. No potions, no urine samples, no rabbits involved. She squints, tilts your chin toward the window, and says with certainty, "You're with child," as though the child is a person already, not a risk, not a parasite, not a gamble. You nod, you try to smile. Inside, something cold curls in your gut that has nothing to do with morning sickness. No one asks you what you want. Wanting is a luxury. You're not a person with choices anymore. You're a vessel. You're the container for the heir, or the spare, or the maybe it'll be a boy this time. Even if you die, the line continues. Your husband will grieve probably, but he'll also remarry. Your child might survive, or it might not. That's just how it is. You're replaceable. The baby isn't. You start to walk differently, slowly, cautiously. You avoid slippery stones and loud noises, and the neighbour's goat, which once knocked a woman flat and sent her into labour 6 weeks early. You're told to avoid strong smells, bitter herbs, and bad dreams. You tie charms around your wrist. You whisper protection spells under your breath when no one's listening. Half the advice you get contradicts the other half. Don't eat eels. Do eat eels. Don't look at a deformed person or the baby will turn out wrong. Don't laugh during storms. Don't sit near cats, or dogs, or men. It's hard to say what's worse, the nausea or the waiting. You wake up every day wondering if today's the day something goes wrong. A slip, a cramp, a silence where there should be movement. You've seen women lose their children before they were even born, and no one comforts them. They just say, God's will, and carry on. Some women get pregnant over and over and have nothing to show for it but pain. You try not to think about that. Sometimes in the quiet of the night, you touch your belly and try to feel something sacred, but all you feel is fear. You're not glowing, you're not radiant, you're exhausted and bloated and constipated. Your back aches, your teeth feel loose. You're told this is normal, which is less reassuring than it sounds. The other women talk about names, blankets, and cradles. You think about coffins, about who will raise your child if you don't survive, about whether you'll be buried with the baby or apart from it. You're told not to be morbid, that worrying will poison the baby's spirit, but worrying feels like the only thing keeping you sane. Everyone is excited. The whole village seems to buzz with the possibility of new life. They smile when you walk past, offer you extra food, sing songs, but none of them will be in that room with you when the time comes. None of them will feel what you're about to feel. You are alone, even now, and you know, deep in your bones, beneath the baby, beneath the fear, that this is just the beginning. You'd like to think you're in good hands, but that would require someone around you to actually understand how the body works, which unfortunately, they don't. Not really. Your midwife has delivered more babies than you can count, but she's never read a book in her life. That's not a slight. She's kind, experienced, and carries herself with quiet authority, but her knowledge is based on repetition, not science. Her tools include a curved knife, a cracked wooden spoon, and a collection of charms tied with fraying red thread. She believes in saints, moon cycles, and boiling water for luck. Not for cleanliness, just luck. The town physician, or if you can call him that, wears a robe that smells like vinegar and pride. He studied medicine in the sense that he once touched a book written in Latin. He talks about humours, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Too much of one makes you moody. Too little makes you faint. Pregnancy, he says, is the body's way of realigning the humours. If you feel sick, it's probably because your womb is wandering. Yes, wandering. He believes your uterus is a sentient creature, prone to travelling up your spine and strangling your heart if you get too emotional. His cure? Sit down, calm down, and maybe breathe in the steam from boiled dandelions. If things go badly, he might suggest bleeding you, because if there's one thing a pregnant woman clearly needs, it's less blood. Bleeding, he insists, purges toxins. It also purges consciousness, strength, and sometimes life. But no one questions it. He has a ring on his finger and a beard that implies wisdom. People trust him. You do not. There are no hospitals, no sterile rooms, no trained specialists. The best you can hope for is a clean bed, a warm fire, and someone who doesn't faint at the sight of blood. And even those are luxuries. Most births happen in kitchens or back rooms or wherever there's space and straw. There's no such thing as a surgical team. No emergency procedures. If the baby comes out breech or the cord wraps around its neck, the options are try harder or pray harder. Superstition fills the gaps where knowledge should be. You're told not to eat certain foods, not because they'll harm the baby, but because they might anger spirits. You're warned against walking under certain trees, looking into mirrors, or touching your belly during eclipses. You're handed a stone wrapped in wool and told to keep it close. It protects against womb heat, which sounds made up, because it is, but you keep it anyway, because you're not taking chances. Herbs are used for everything. Some are harmless, mint for nausea, lavender for headaches. Others are more aggressive. Pennyroyal, for instance, can help bring on menstruation, which is another way of saying it induces miscarriage. But no one uses that word. Miscarriage is a sin, a punishment, or both. If a woman bleeds early, it's her fault. She ate the wrong route, lifted something too heavy, or thought about something she shouldn't have. The body's failures are always blamed on the woman, never the advice she was given. You once heard of a woman who died after being treated with roasted onions and mashed beetle shells. Her healer insisted the concoction had drawn out the illness. The illness, in that case, being her life. It's hard to argue with people who think death is a sign the treatment worked, just not fast enough. If you die in childbirth, no one will call it malpractice. They'll call it God's plan. Midwives, for their part, do what they can. They have no tools for surgery, no anaesthesia, no antiseptic. Their hands are their instruments, and those hands have touched 100 other labours. Sometimes they wash them, sometimes they don't. But they know things the physicians don't, like how to feel for the baby's position, how to encourage a contraction, and how to pull when pulling is all that's left. They've seen it all, and sometimes they still cry. But even they are guessing. Every birth is different. Some women scream for days and then give birth to a baby the size of a turnip. Others are quiet for an hour and then die suddenly without warning. There's no pattern, no predictability, only the hope that whatever happens, it won't happen to you. The terrifying truth is that no one really knows what's going on inside your body. Not you, not your midwife, and certainly not the man with the leeches. They say life begins at conception, but around here, it often ends at birth. And when it does, the only answer you'll get is a shrug and a murmured prayer. Because in medieval medicine, death isn't a failure. It's just part of the process. There's a popular idea, centuries from now, that pregnancy makes women glow, that their skin softens, their hair shines, and their eyes carry some divine maternal sparkle. That idea has clearly never met medieval Europe. Here, pregnancy doesn't make you glow. It makes you swollen, constipated, and vaguely damp. Your feet puff up like overripe fruit. Your gums bleed. You develop a rash in places you didn't even know could rash. You're not radiant. You're overheated and full of fluid. Your cravings make people nervous. You once begged for salted turnips dipped in honey and vinegar, and the midwife made the sign of the cross. One woman in the village craved coal ash during her pregnancy, and when her baby was born pale and sickly, everyone blamed the craving, not the actual conditions she lived in. If you ask for anything strange, you do it quietly. Not because you're ashamed, but because you don't want your neighbours whispering that your unborn child is already cursed. Every symptom becomes a moral failing. If you're too tired, you're lazy. If you're sick too often, maybe you angered God. If you can't keep food down, someone suggests it's because you looked at a beggar with a twisted foot. Superstition fills every corner of your waking life. You cross yourself before meals. You avoid certain wells. You flinch when you see black birds. If a toad looks at you wrong, you wonder if you should prepare for a miscarriage. You try to stay upright during sleep because lying flat puts pressure on your lungs and bladder, which already hate you. You lean against a bundle of old clothes, shifting every few hours when your legs fall asleep. You don't get rest. You get naps, layered in sweat and interrupted by dreams of bleeding or birth or both. You've stopped thinking of sleep as restorative. It's just the quiet part of survival. The swelling gets worse in the 3rd month. Then again in the 5th, your ankles vanish. Your fingers look like sausages. You stop wearing your better tunic because it no longer fits, and you can't afford to ruin it. Your hair falls out in clumps. Your back aches like you've been hauling firewood every hour of every day. The women in your life say this is normal, and they're not wrong, but that doesn't mean it's bearable. Tooth pain becomes a familiar companion. You've heard it said that a woman loses a tooth with every child, and while that might not be scientifically true, your mouth certainly seems to believe it. Chewing becomes an exercise in patience. You mostly eat soft things now. Mashed beans, porridge, anything that doesn't crunch or crack. If you're lucky, you get meat broth. If you're not, you get bread so hard it could be used as a weapon. The shame is harder to talk about. Not the shame of pregnancy. That's expected and even celebrated. No, it's the shame of complaining, of feeling like your body's failing before the hard part even begins. Everyone expects you to be brave and maternal, grateful even, but you're not. You're terrified. You're miserable. And you can't say that out loud without being called selfish or soft. So you smile when people ask how you're feeling and nod when they say things like, "You'll forget the pain once the baby's in your arms," which is only true if you die in the process. Your husband grows impatient. Not cruel, just oblivious. He thinks the hard part comes later. He still wants you to cook, clean, tend to the animals. He pats your stomach like it's a loaf of bread rising nicely and tells his friends that you're doing well. You want to hit him with a broom. Instead, you smile. He's proud. That's what matters. There are no checkups, no charts, no idea whether the baby is healthy or even alive. If it kicks, you feel relief. If it doesn't, you try not to panic. You rub your belly in slow circles, whispering things you don't fully believe. That it will be okay. That you will be okay. You think of other women who look just as swollen, just as tired, and never made it to the end. You try not to picture their faces. Pregnancy is not a miracle. It's a marathon you didn't sign up for, with no guarantee of a finish line. Every day brings a new sensation, some mildly uncomfortable, some genuinely alarming. And through it all, you're expected to smile, to serve, to bear it all quietly, like a good woman should. But in the silence of your thoughts, when no one is watching, you admit the truth. You don't feel blessed, you feel cursed, and the hardest part hasn't even begun. By the time your belly swells to the size of a breadbasket and your feet disappear beneath you, you begin to accept what everyone else has quietly known from the start. You might not make it. No one says it outright, of course. That would be bad luck. But they know, you know. And so, somewhere between your shallow breaths and sleepless nights, you start preparing for the possibility that this will be your last season. You begin with the practical things. You sew your shroud, not out of morbidity. It's just what women do. You pick the fabric carefully, something plain but not ragged, something soft enough that it won't itch when you're wrapped in it for burial. You keep it folded at the bottom of your chest, next to your best linen and a half-finished kerchief. You don't look at it often, but it's there, a quiet reminder. Like a clock ticking. Next comes the will, assuming you can write. If you can't, someone else does it for you. The priest perhaps, or your husband, if he's not too squeamish about confronting mortality in ink. You list your belongings, meagre as they are. A carved comb, a shawl your mother gave you, a few beads, a worn rosary, the iron pot with the good handle. These aren't riches, but they mean something to you, and you'd rather decide where they go than leave it to chance. You write your name carefully, slowly, pressing the letters as if each one might outlive you. You give away the small things early, the things no one would fight over, ribbons, buttons, scraps of embroidery. Your younger sister cries when you press a blue hair tie into her palm. You tell her it's just in case. She nods, but her mouth is a tight line, and neither of you says what you're thinking. You start praying over the objects you leave behind, quietly blessing them with the only kind of power you have left. It's not that you believe it'll help, but it feels better than doing nothing. You try to talk to your husband about what happens if you die. He changes the subject. He doesn't want to hear it. He tells you not to be morbid, but you're not being morbid, you're being realistic. You remind him where the shroud is kept. You show him the will. He nods and promises not to lose it. Then he leaves the room, probably to go pray or drink, or simply pretend none of this is real. At night, when the house is quiet and the fire has burned low, you talk to the baby. You whisper into the darkness, hoping your words find ears. You tell them they are wanted, that they are loved, that you're sorry for bringing them into a world so heavy and cruel. You ask them to be strong. You ask them to be kind. You ask them to forgive you if you don't make it. There's a ceremony some women perform in secret, a kind of spiritual insurance. You tie a red thread around your wrist and sleep with it for 9 nights. On the 10th, you burn it with sage and whisper your name into the fire. The idea is that, should you die, your spirit will find its way back to your family. You're not sure you believe it, but you do it anyway. Some women commission charms from the old woman who lives near the edge of town, small carved talismans meant to ward off death. You've seen them. Tiny wooden dolls, stones etched with symbols no one can quite translate. They're not blessed by the church, which makes them suspicious, but not enough to stop desperate mothers from clutching them during labour. You consider buying one, then you don't. If your fate is already written, you're not sure a splintered twig will change it. You stop attending large gatherings, not because you're unwell, but because people look at you differently now, like a guest who might not be staying long. The other women treat you gently, but there's a sadness behind their eyes, a practiced grief. Every time someone asks when you're due, there's a pause, a breath held, as if the answer might tip the scales one way or another. You don't cry, not usually. There's no time for that. You save your strength. You save your tears for the moment they might be needed. For when the pains begin. For when the priest is called. For when you realise that all the careful preparations in the world can't guarantee anything. Not your survival, not the child's, not even peace. But you keep preparing anyway, because it's the only control you have left. And because if you do die, and you might, you want to die knowing you faced it head on, with needle in hand, with a will in the drawer, and with a whisper in the dark that said, I was here, I mattered, I tried. You would think that with everything your body is going through, the church might offer a little comfort, some warmth perhaps, reassurance, but no, comfort isn't really the church's specialty when it comes to women in labour. What it offers instead is doctrine. And doctrine, like most things in your life, is not on your side. The priests say you suffer because Eve sinned. That's the explanation. Passed down from pulpit to pew, carved into sermons, and whispered in confessionals. It doesn't matter that you didn't eat the apple, or speak to a snake, or do anything other than be born female. Pain in childbirth, they say, is part of the divine punishment, a holy correction for the original act of disobedience. You're told it's righteous to endure it. That agony makes you closer to God, that your screaming will echo all the way to heaven and come back as grace. The church loves to talk about salvation, especially when survival is in question. They remind you that your body may perish, but your soul can be saved. If you're obedient, if you're faithful, if you accept your role without complaint. It's strange how salvation always seems to involve women dying quietly while men nod solemnly. You begin to wonder how many of your ancestors bled out while a priest muttered encouragement from the corner. You're told to prepare spiritually as well as physically. That means confession. That means prayer. That means walking to the chapel with a belly full of worry and kneeling while your hips throb. The priest listens to your sins, small ones mostly, harsh words, secret fears, the occasional flash of anger at your husband. He nods gravely and offers penance. He never once asks what you're afraid of, because the answer would be everything. There is a ceremony performed late in pregnancy, one that blesses the child in your womb. It's meant to protect the soul, not the body. So if the baby dies before it can be baptized, it won't be trapped in limbo. You hold your belly while the priest prays over you. You say amen. You don't ask why there isn't a similar blessing for your own survival. You already know the answer. The baby is innocent. You are not. You're allowed communion, confession, and holy water. You are not allowed to question anything. If you die, the priest will say, you passed into God's arms. If the baby dies, he'll offer comfort, and maybe a funeral, assuming it was baptized in time. If you both die, the church will bury you properly, and remind the living that God's will is mysterious, but always just. It's hard to argue with men who've decided suffering is sacred, especially when they're the ones writing the rules. The priest visits now and then just to check in. He asks about your soul more than your symptoms. He reminds you that heaven is eternal, unlike the fleeting pains of this life. You don't tell him that the pains don't feel fleeting at all. You don't tell him that eternal life sounds less appealing when you're already exhausted by this one. If the worst happens and you die without receiving the sacraments, there are prayers for that too. Emergency absolution, whispered as you bleed, as you scream, as your consciousness drifts. It doesn't matter that no one knows what you're saying in your final moments. The church has a script for it. They always do. The church doesn't hate you. It simply doesn't concern itself with your comfort. It sees you as a vessel, a means to an end, a soul carrier, a life bringer, a reminder of original sin. If you survive, it was God's mercy. If you don't, it was God's plan. Either way, they'll ring the bells and say the prayers, and your name will live on, in ink, in grief, and perhaps, if you're lucky, in the child you leave behind. You'd like to know when, exactly, this ordeal is going to reach its terrifying crescendo, but this is medieval Europe, and precise medical timelines don't exist. No one's circling a date on a calendar. Calendars, for the record, are mostly for saints' days, taxes, and when to slaughter the pig. Your due date, that's more of a vague feeling, a whisper passed between women, a shrug disguised as wisdom. The midwife squints at your belly and says, "Soon." You ask her what that means. She says, "Before the first frost, God willing," which could be 2 weeks or 2 months depending on how the wind shifts and how much she trusts the wool merchant's gossip about the coming season. She touches your wrist like she's reading your pulse. But really, she's watching your face, trying to see if you'll cry. You don't. Not yet. There's no ultrasound, no stethoscope, no blood pressure cuff. Your pregnancy is tracked by belly size, appetite, and the way your ankles behave at dusk. Some women swear by moon cycles, others by dreams. One woman in your village believes the baby will come when the cat starts sleeping in the hearth again. The cat, unfortunately, is feral and sleeps wherever it wants. Not exactly reliable. There is a method, supposedly, where the midwife holds a piece of string with a stone over your belly. If it swings in a circle, it's a boy. If it swings back and forth, it's a girl. If it just hangs there and does nothing, they usually decide to try again later. It's not about accuracy. It's about keeping everyone calm. If people believe there's a plan, they're less likely to panic when there isn't. Sometimes you feel a kick. It's comforting, mostly. At least something is alive in there, even if it's been keeping you up at night and assaulting your bladder like it holds a personal grudge. Other times it's quiet for too long. You lie still, hold your breath, press your fingers against the skin, and pray for movement. When nothing happens, your mind goes somewhere dark. Then you feel a flutter, and you exhale, shaking from relief you try not to show. Everyone around you seems to have a different opinion. Your neighbour says it'll be early. You're carrying low. Your aunt says it'll be late. Your face hasn't changed yet. You didn't know your face was supposed to change. She says it with a kind of certainty that makes you feel like you've failed already. You look in the mirror that night and try to spot what's missing. Your husband thinks the baby will come on a Sunday. He says it like a fact, like he's been granted divine insight between mouthfuls of barley stew. You smile because it's easier than explaining that Sunday births are statistically no safer, and you don't care about the day of the week, just the outcome. He keeps making plans for when the baby arrives, as if the act of imagining it will keep you both alive. You don't stop him, but you do envy his optimism. As your belly stretches tighter, every little shift becomes a possible signal. You get cramps. You wonder if it's the beginning. You get indigestion. You wonder if it's a sign. You sneeze too hard and have to sit down. Everything feels like it might be the start of something, or nothing. The waiting becomes its own kind of torment, a purgatory made of wool, fatigue, and vague prophecies from women who mean well, but can't actually help you. You begin to realise that you're not preparing for a moment. You're preparing for a window, a long creeping stretch of uncertainty during which anything could happen. The baby could come in the dead of night, or during market day. It could come early and fragile, or late and enormous. It could come screaming silent, or not at all. You prepare for each possibility in equal measure, which is to say, you don't prepare at all. You just wait. The midwife visits again and says it won't be long now. She says it with a smile, but something behind her eyes is tired. She's seen what not long can mean. She checks your belly, your feet, the colour of your lips. Then she lights a candle and says a short prayer under her breath. You recognise a few words: mercy, strength, peace. None of them feel particularly predictive. And so you go to bed that night like you have every night for the past 2 weeks. Wondering if you'll wake up to pain or blood or both. Wondering if tomorrow will be the day you meet your child, or the day you don't wake up at all. Either way, there's no calendar date for that. Just dusk and breath, and a midwife with a tired smile, trying her best to read the sky. Eventually, the guessing ends. The real thing begins. It starts with a cramp, not sharp, not unbearable, just enough to make you stop what you're doing, sewing, sweeping, something unimportant, and clutch your belly with a quiet breath. You wait. It fades. You try to pretend it's nothing. A stomach pang. Something you ate. Maybe the baby shifted. You go back to your task, slower this time. But the second cramp doesn't give you the option to ignore it. It's stronger, lower, more deliberate. You don't say anything right away. That would make it real. You finish what you're doing with shaking hands, then sit down to catch your breath. The third wave hits while you're pretending to rest. This one steals the air from your lungs and makes your toes curl. You say a word you shouldn't. One of the older women in the house looks over and immediately knows. She stands without speaking and walks outside. Within minutes, others begin to arrive. There's no dramatic announcement. No one shouts. It's time! The news spreads quietly, efficiently, as it always does. A birth is beginning, or possibly a death. Either way, it requires witnesses. Midwives, neighbours, a few women who've done this before and still carry the haunted look of survival. They file into the house with baskets and towels and that particular tight-lipped expression, reserved for events no one can stop, only endure. Someone starts boiling water, not for cleanliness. Sterilisation isn't a concept that exists yet, but because people need something to do with their hands. Hot water can warm towels, soften herbs, distract the anxious. It's ritual, a way of pretending control exists. You sit on the edge of the bed while people bustle around you, talking in low voices, as if you're not there, as if you're a piece of furniture that's about to break. The cramps, contractions, though no one calls them that, come faster now. Your belly tightens like a fist. Your lower back begins to throb. The pain is a slow-growing tide and you're standing in its path. You try to breathe through it. You grip the edge of the mattress or a piece of wood or someone's wrist. The midwife arrives and gives you a look that isn't quite comfort. She nods once, then she rolls up her sleeves. There's no privacy anymore. You're stripped down to a shift or less. Your legs are examined, your belly pressed, your groin studied like it's a puzzle no one really wants to solve. You're asked questions you barely understand and given instructions you can't focus on. Someone hands you a piece of leather to bite. Someone else starts rubbing something sharp-smelling on your temples. The air is heavy with sweat, herbs and dread. You try to stay quiet at first, but soon the pain demands sound. You cry out, once then again. The women around you murmur encouragement. They say you're strong, that you're progressing, that it's all going well. You start to notice that going well sounds suspiciously similar to going very badly, just with more eye contact. You don't ask what they're seeing. You don't want to know. Between waves of pain, time stops meaning anything. You could be labouring for hours or days. There's no clock, just the movement of shadows on the wall and the steady clink of ladles against pots. At one point, you swear the sun has risen and set again. Though no one confirms it, you drift between contractions, sweating and shivering. Someone wipes your face with a cloth that's already soaked through. You try to say thank you, but your mouth won't form the words. The baby hasn't come yet, but something inside you has shifted. You're no longer waiting. You're surviving. You understand now why so many women die doing this. Not just because it's dangerous, but because it's relentless. There's no escape, no pause button, just pain and breath, and the growing realization that this might be your last memory. You catch the midwife glancing at the other women. They nod, too quickly. You don't ask what it means. Instead, you close your eyes and whisper something. To God, to the baby, to whoever might be listening. You don't care who hears, you just want it to end, one way or another. And outside in the corner of the room, the water keeps boiling. No one remembers who started it. No one will use it. But it gives people something to do, something to hold on to. While you, on the bed, do the one thing that really matters. Fight for your life. They lead you to the birthing room, as if you're entering a sacred space, but it feels more like a prison. The windows are shuttered, the curtains drawn tight, and the door is closed behind you, with the kind of quiet finality that makes you wonder if anyone plans to open it again. The room is small, dim, and stifling, not by accident. Darkness is said to keep away evil spirits. Spirits, apparently, are more sensitive to light than to screaming. Every mirror is covered with cloth, because if you catch your reflection during labour, superstition says the soul can slip out of your body and not return. You wonder who decided that? Probably someone who'd never had to give birth in a windowless sweatbox. The room is holy by medieval standards, which means there are crosses hung crookedly on the walls, dried herbs nailed to the beams, and the faint smell of incense clinging to everything like mildew. You try to breathe deeply, but the air is thick and unmoving, like it's already been exhaled by someone else. No men are allowed. This is a woman's domain, though not in any empowering sense. Men are kept out because they're thought to bring in sin or confusion or just general bad energy. Besides, most wouldn't know what to do if they were here. They're more useful outside, pacing, praying, or pretending this isn't happening. Inside the room, it's just you, the midwife, and a handful of women who've been through this themselves and look like they haven't fully recovered. Someone starts praying almost immediately. Quiet words repeated over and over, half in Latin, half in local dialect. It's not comforting. It's more like a spell being cast to keep death at bay. You're not even sure who it's meant for. You, the baby, the midwife, or the room itself. A woman kneels in the corner with a rosary that's missing a bead. Her lips move faster as your groans get louder. The heat builds fast. Labour is physical, violent work, and the room traps every drop of sweat. Your clothes stick to you. Your hair clings to your neck. No one opens the window, even now, with the air thick enough to chew. Opening a window might let in bad spirits, or worse, a breeze. And in this sacred little oven, nothing must interfere with what God and gravity have begun. Someone brings a dull blade. It's not clear what it's for. Cutting cloth, cutting cord, cutting you if it comes to that. It's laid down on a cloth that was probably white once, but now carries the stains of a dozen births. No one says anything about the blade. You all pretend it's just a precaution, like the extra linens or the blessed candle, but everyone knows. If the baby won't come, or comes the wrong way, or gets stuck, someone may have to use it. On you. You try not to look at it. There are no pillows. You rest on folded cloth, maybe hay, something lumpy and damp and vaguely soft. You're arranged like a sacrifice, not quite lying, not quite sitting. Legs splayed, arms shaking, breath ragged. There's a cross above the door, a dried wreath on the wall, and a cup of something bitter pushed to your lips every so often. You drink it because it dulls the edge of the pain for half a heartbeat. Then the next wave hits, and it doesn't matter what's in the cup. The women around you murmur encouragement, but their voices sound far away. You've become a single task. Open, push, survive. The sacred symbols on the walls are less reassuring now, and more like reminders that this place was built for death, just as much as for life. You begin to realise that everything in the room, the prayers, the herbs, the cloth-covered mirrors, isn't there to help you. It's there to prepare for what happens if you don't make it. The room is quiet except for your breathing and the shifting of cloth. Even the midwife moves with silence now, like noise might disturb the fragile thread between you and survival. No one talks about how long this will last. No one says how much more pain is coming. That knowledge is kept behind pursed lips and lowered eyes. You had hoped this space would feel safe, a haven carved out for something sacred. But it's not a sanctuary. It's a trap, a soft-lit tomb with your name already whispered into the mortar. And if you want to leave it alive, you'll have to fight your way out. One breath, one scream, one prayer at a time. When the pain becomes too much for you to think, speak, or scream clearly, the midwife takes over. You're no longer the centre of this process. Not really. You're the vessel, the battleground, the stage. She is the general now. She's done this more times than she can count, and she carries that experience not like pride, but like weight. Her face is unreadable, practiced, composed. Her hands move with speed and certainty, even as the room begins to unravel around you. She doesn't tell you everything she's doing. There's no time. She presses your belly, adjusts your legs, murmurs something to one of the other women. They pass her towels and hot water, not because they're useful, but because the ritual demands it. She gives you a small piece of dried root to chew, bitter and fibrous, something meant to calm the nerves or settle the stomach, though it mostly just makes you gag. You chew anyway. You need something to hold on to. She lights a candle near the head of the bed, takes her knife, and carves a cross into the wax. It's not for light. The flame is weak and flickering, barely touching the corners of the room. It's for luck, or protection, or atonement. No one knows anymore. She ties your legs apart with 2 strips of linen that still smell faintly of mildew and wood smoke. They were probably boiled hours ago, maybe not. You can't tell. And she doesn't say. There's blood already, not too much, just enough to make the midwife tilt her head slightly, the way someone might look at clouds before a storm. She doesn't panic. She doesn't comfort you either. She wipes it away and continues, pressing her hand to your thigh, her fingers calloused and cold. She knows this process is brutal and impersonal and sometimes final. She's seen too many women die trying to bring someone else into the world. She doesn't want to see another one. She whispers something in a tongue that sounds older than Latin. Not church Latin, but something rougher, grainier, like river stones rubbing together. Maybe it's a prayer. Maybe it's a spell. You don't care. You just want it to work. You want her to have power, even if it's the kind no priest would ever acknowledge. You watch her face when you can. It's a map of every birth she's attended, every loss she carries silently in her bones. She doesn't flinch when you scream. She doesn't blink when you bleed. She adjusts you like a carpenter repairing a cracked beam. Gentle, but efficient. She's trying to save you, but you can tell she's also preparing in case she can't. The other women follow her lead. They fold cloths, wipe your face, murmur encouragement you barely register, but the midwife is the sun in this small solar system. Everything orbits her, even your pain. You cling to her voice, even when it's just grunts and commands. When she tells you to push, you push. When she tells you to rest, you rest. She could tell you the sky's on fire, and you'd nod, because your world has narrowed to her face, her hands, her judgment. You're barely conscious of time now. Your breath comes in gasps, shallow and broken. Your hands cramp from gripping the edge of the mattress. The candle flickers, and the air smells like iron and fear. You can't tell if you're progressing or failing. All you know is that the midwife is still there, still working, still trying, and as long as she stays calm, as long as she doesn't stop moving, you believe, or at least pretend, that you still have a chance. At some point, the pain becomes so consuming that screaming is the only thing left. It erupts from you, raw, involuntary, jagged around the edges. No one flinches, no one seems alarmed. In this room, screaming is considered a good sign. It means you're still fighting. It means you haven't slipped under the current yet. Every woman in the room has done it herself, or heard it from others. They hear your cries and nod. Expected, normal. They say the same things they always say. You're doing well. It won't be long now. You're almost there. You've heard the phrase almost there at least a dozen times in the last few hours, and you've started to suspect it means nothing. It's not a measurement, it's a spell, a chant repeated to hold the room together. The truth is, no one knows how close you are. They can guess, but only by the tone of your voice, the force of your pushing, the way your hands claw at the sheets. There is blood. You expected some. Everyone did. But it's beginning to soak the cloth beneath you now, spreading wider and darker each time you bear down. The midwife sees it. She doesn't say anything, but you catch the glance she gives to her assistant, brief, sharp, tight around the mouth. They begin swapping out the rags more often, without comment. You ask if it's too much. No one answers directly. One of the older women pats your arm and says, "That's how it goes." You want that to be comforting. It isn't. The room feels smaller now. The heat hasn't changed, but it's harder to breathe. You've screamed yourself hoarse, and your voice has started to splinter into sobs. You think about begging for it to stop, for them to cut it out of you, to just end it. But you know there's nothing they can do. There are no alternatives. This is it. This is the method. You either survive it or you don't. No one meets your eyes anymore. They look at your stomach, your legs, your hands, but not your face. You understand why. Faces show fear. Faces plead. And right now, no one in the room wants to acknowledge just how bad it's getting. They want you to be another story of endurance, not one of those whispered tales that begins with, "She was strong, but..." Then without quite meaning to, you stop screaming. The pain is still there, sharp, monstrous, unrelenting, but the sounds won't come anymore. Your throat is too dry, your chest too tight. You go quiet, and in that silence the room changes. The air shifts. You feel it before anyone speaks. They notice immediately, though no one says it aloud. Your silence isn't relief. It's a warning. The midwife leans closer. She presses on your abdomen with more urgency now, watching your face carefully. The others try to hide their worry behind more encouraging words, but their voices have changed. Faster, thinner, more brittle. They tell you to push, to breathe, to stay awake. You hear your name more often now, and you realise they're afraid of losing you. Not because they care deeply, necessarily, but because they've seen how quickly things fall apart. You drift in and out. Not sleep, but something hazy and grey. Between contractions, your mind blanks out, and you forget where you are. You forget who's in the room with you. For a moment, you forget what you're doing. Then the next wave of pain drags you back into your body, and you remember everything all at once. One of the younger women wipes your forehead with shaking hands. She looks barely old enough to understand what's happening. She's crying now, silently, trying to hide it. You wonder if this will be the moment that makes her decide never to have children, or if someday she'll be the one kneeling beside another woman's bed, saying the same words, watching the same blood pool beneath someone else. You try to scream again, but your voice is gone. You try to ask if the baby is close. No one answers. They just keep telling you to push, to be strong, to hold on. And you do. Not because you believe you'll make it, but because stopping means dying. And you're not ready for that. Not yet. The candle is burning low. The blade is still nearby. The prayers continue, faster now, more desperate. And through it all, you lie there in the centre of the storm. Not screaming, not pleading, just pushing. One breath at a time. One pain at a time. One thread away from vanishing. You knew this wouldn't be easy, but you didn't expect it to feel endless. And now, something is changing. Not in the way they keep saying, not the almost there kind of change. This is different. Heavier, slower, wrong. The pain has shifted into something deeper, more bone deep and hollow. You keep pushing, like they tell you to. but nothing happens. You feel the weight of the baby still inside you, unmoved. You can tell, even without experience, that it's not coming. The midwife's tone changes first. She still tells you to push, but now her voice is tighter. She says things faster, more urgently, and stops pretending to smile. One of the helpers fetches more cloths. Another begins muttering prayers with a little too much intensity. The air in the room, already heavy, becomes leaden. You feel their fear before they say it, and then they don't say it. No one wants to say it, but it's clear. Something's wrong. Maybe the baby has turned the wrong way. Maybe it's stuck. Maybe it's just too big. Or maybe your body, worn down and hollowed out, has simply given up. No one knows for sure. There are no scans, no charts, no real understanding. All they can do is guess. They press on your belly, listen for movement, whisper to each other as if you can't hear them. You hear everything. Someone says, "She's not progressing." Another whispers, "It hasn't dropped." You don't know what any of it means. You only know that the pain is still there, and nothing is happening. The midwife puts her hand inside you again, not gently, not kindly. She frowns. You watch her face as she feels around blindly, searching for orientation, for hope. Then she tells you not to move, as if that's an option. There are no forceps, no surgical tools, no sterile gloves, just hands, just prayers, just desperation. They try to turn the baby manually. Two of the women hold your legs while the midwife works. It's not a procedure, it's an invasion. You feel your vision blur at the edges, feel your breath stutter. Your back arches involuntarily, violently. You scream again, hoarse, ragged, nearly soundless, and someone presses a cloth between your teeth. You pass out before they're done. When you wake, it's still happening. You're still on the bed, still in the room, still in pain. The candle has burned lower. The air smells worse now, sweat and fear, and something sharper underneath. You realise you must have been unconscious for a while, but no one says how long. They just look relieved that you've opened your eyes, that you're still here, for now. You ask if the baby is coming. They tell you to rest. You ask again. The midwife tells you to pray. They give you something to drink, bitter, thick, herbal. It doesn't help. It only coats your mouth and makes your stomach lurch. You swallow because they tell you to, and because you don't have the strength to argue. You try to shift your legs. One of them feels numb. You try to lift your head. The room spins like a wheel in mud. They try again. You can feel them repositioning you, bracing your thighs with old towels, pushing on your belly from above. Somewhere in the chaos, someone starts crying again. You don't know who it is. It might be you. You can't tell anymore. There's talk of cutting, of whether it would help, of whether there's time, but the knife they have isn't sharp enough, and no one here is trained for that kind of intervention. So they keep going with what they know. Pressure, pleading, instinct. The baby hasn't moved in hours, or maybe it has and not in the right direction. You begin to wonder if the child is already gone, if that's why it won't come, if your body's refusing to let go of something that's already been lost. You don't ask. You don't want to know the answer. You just keep breathing, shallow and slow, afraid that stopping would be easier than continuing. The prayers grow louder. The midwife's hands don't stop moving. Your legs are shaking, your mouth is dry, and your thoughts are starting to float. You're not sure if you're fading or just detaching, like a bird pulling free from a snare. Not because it escaped, but because it stopped feeling the wire around its neck. Someone says, "Please." You don't know if they're talking to God, to the baby, or to you, but the room keeps spinning. The pain keeps coming, and nothing is moving forward, only deeper, only darker, only down. It's not a sudden gush like you imagined. It's a steady leak, a spreading tide that turns every cloth dark and every face pale. You can feel it in the way your hands go cold and your thoughts get thinner. It's not just pain now, it's weakness, deep and bone heavy, like your body is slowly unthreading itself from the inside out. You try to speak, but the words don't come. Your mouth moves. No sound follows. Someone notices. The midwife shouts for more rags. Her voice is sharper now, stripped of any softness. The calm professionalism is gone, replaced by urgency. The kind that makes everyone else in the room go quiet. Someone near your feet starts crying. You can't see who it is, but you know it isn't you. You haven't cried, not yet. You don't have the strength for it. The rags come quickly, already stained before they reach you. Hands press into your thighs, into your belly. The pressure hurts. Everything hurts. But the pain is becoming distant. The edges of your vision blur. The candlelight dances in strange patterns. You feel your pulse in your ears, then in your chest, then not at all. For a moment, you think you've died. Then someone slaps your cheek lightly and tells you to stay with them. The priest is called. You hear someone run out of the room. The door slams. Moments later, the familiar rustle of robes and the scent of stale incense enter with him. He's muttering Latin before he even crosses the threshold. Not because it helps, but because that's what he's supposed to do. He sprinkles water over your forehead. Some of it gets in your eyes, you blink slowly, like someone trying to remember how to be awake. He speaks to your soul, not your body. The assumption is clear. You're on your way out. His voice is low, practiced. You've heard it at funerals before. It sounds exactly the same now. You wonder if the baby is alive. No one tells you. No one even says the word baby. They talk around it, talk over it. You hear the midwife say something about turning, about trying again. You feel nothing but the warm wetness between your legs and the way your heart seems to be trying to beat underwater. And then the whispering starts. It begins at the far corner of the room, just out of earshot, women speaking to each other in hushed tones that stop the moment you turn your head. You can't make out the words, but the meaning hangs thick in the air. Maybe it's a punishment. Maybe you did something wrong. Maybe you brought this on yourself. Maybe it's witchcraft. They won't say it directly, of course, not unless you die. Then it'll be easier. Then they can pick apart your behaviour, the herbs you used, the way you spoke to the cat that one afternoon, the fact that you once refused communion because your stomach turned. All the little things that didn't matter until now. All the harmless oddities that become suspicious the moment your blood won't stop pooling on the floor. One of the women crosses herself and refuses to meet your gaze. Another clutches a rosary and stands farther from the bed than before. You can feel their fear, but it isn't just fear of death. It's fear of contamination. Fear that whatever is happening to you could happen to them. And if it does, they want to believe it's because you were different. Flawed, cursed. It makes them feel safer. The midwife snaps at someone, tells them to hush. You catch the word fools. She's still working, still pressing, still trying, but her face looks drawn, grey, like she's already halfway through mourning. She doesn't believe the whispers, but you've seen enough to know that if you die, she'll be the next target. She touched you. She made the decisions. The line between healer and heretic is thin, especially when the outcome is soaked in red. You close your eyes, but the light presses through your lids. You can hear the prayers and the shuffling feet and the dripping cloth hitting the floor. You wonder if this is the moment you leave your body. If this is what it feels like to slip, not into sleep, but into something quieter, something final. Someone calls your name. You open your eyes again, barely. There's still blood, still whispers, still a priest with a hand on your head, already speaking to a God who may or may not be listening. And through it all, you keep breathing. Not because you want to, but because your body hasn't stopped yet. There is a moment, barely more than a breath, when the room goes still. No one is shouting. No one is praying. No one is pressing rags to your skin. The only sound is your own laboured breathing and the distant crackle of a candle that's almost burned itself out. Then suddenly, there's movement, urgency. The final push. You don't remember doing it. Not exactly. The midwife says now, and your body obeys because there's nothing left but instinct and exhaustion. The pain, which had become background noise in your body's collapse, surges again. Your vision blurs. You bear down with what strength you have left. And then something tears. Something releases. The baby is born. Or at least something leaves you. There is a wetness, a weight, and then emptiness. The sensation is so sudden it makes you dizzy. The midwife is holding something. The women crowd around her. You can't see clearly. Your head won't turn the way you want it to, but you hear the rustling, the quick whispers, the snap of cloth being pulled tight. You ask, barely above a whisper, "Is it alive?" No one answers. If the baby is moving, breathing, even crying, it's not loud. But then you hear feet rushing across the room, the door opening, voices rising in urgency. You know what that means. They're taking it to be baptized, immediately, before anything else happens, before it's too late, before someone in heaven decides this one wasn't meant to stay. You're told it's tradition, but you know it's really insurance. A soul can't risk lingering in limbo. If the baby dies before the priest can splash water on its forehead and mumble the right words, it might never make it to heaven. That's what they say. You don't know if you believe it. But someone does, enough to snatch the child from the room and sprint across the yard like the devil's chasing them. You want to ask what it looks like, whether it's a boy or girl, whether it cried, whether it's warm, but your lips feel heavy, and the women around you keep pressing things into your hands, against your legs, around your waist. You ask again. Someone finally says they're doing what they can, which is the kind of answer that could mean anything. If the baby doesn't make it, you won't be allowed to hold it. Not for long anyway. You might be allowed a glance, a name if the priest got there in time. But if it was still born or died before being baptized, the rules get complicated. No consecrated ground, no funeral rites, no place in the churchyard next to the relatives who died properly. They'll bury it quietly, quickly, maybe outside the walls of the cemetery. You'll be told not to look, not to dwell, not to ask questions. It's better not to linger on these things, they'll say. Better to focus on healing, as if healing is possible, as if your body didn't just lose everything it had to give. And if the baby lives, they'll bring it back swaddled and cleaned, already claimed by God. You might get to hold it for a moment. You might even recognize its face, but you'll also notice how everyone treats it like a miracle, like the child alone deserves congratulations. Your part is over. You were the vessel. They'll speak of your bravery. Then they'll shift the attention to the future, as if your body wasn't still torn and bleeding beneath the covers. Either way, you're told not to look too long, not to hope too hard. In this world, new life and death sit shoulder to shoulder. Sometimes they switch places without anyone noticing. Back in the room, you drift somewhere between pain and silence. You don't know if you've lost or won. You only know that something is missing. A piece of you. Maybe the baby. Maybe your strength. Maybe the part of yourself that believed you would walk away from this unchanged. You close your eyes not to sleep, but to stop seeing the blood on the sheets. You ask one more time, "Is it okay?" Someone finally answers, "We'll see." The room doesn't celebrate. There's no cheer, no applause, no cries of joy. Just the low, rustling sounds of cloth being folded, water being poured, and prayers muttered under shallow breaths. You're still here, that much is certain, but the word alive feels too generous. You're more of a shape now. A body, barely tethered to breath and bone, lying limp in a bed that smells like iron and damp linen. You're shaking. It's not cold exactly. The air is still heavy with heat, but your body has given out. The kind of shivering that comes not from temperature, but from the hollow place where strength used to live. Your limbs tremble involuntarily, a leftover rhythm from all that, pushing and tearing and surviving. You're soaked in blood inside and out, and your shift is so saturated It clings like another layer of skin. They haven't removed it. You're not sure they dare. No one tells you exactly what happened. Maybe you tore, maybe they cut, maybe both. The midwife looks tired, her face pale beneath the smudges of sweat and soot, and the set of her jaw suggests something didn't go the way she hoped. You want to ask, but your mouth won't cooperate. Your tongue feels thick, your throat is dry. Someone tries to give you broth. They lift the cup to your lips, but the smell makes your stomach churn, and the first sip dribbles back down your chin. You want to apologise, but even that takes too much energy. There's no stitching, not here, not for you, no fine thread, no curved needle, no trained hands to repair the damage. Just pressure, herbs and luck. Maybe some cobwebs, if someone remembered to bring them. They're said to help stop bleeding. The midwife packs you with cloth, binds your thighs with rough linen, and whispers something to the other women that you're not meant to hear. You catch one word, fissure. The pain hasn't stopped, but it's changed. It's duller now, less sharp, but constant, like your body is humming with injury. Every breath is an effort. Every heartbeat echoes in the hollow of your pelvis, like someone tapping the inside of a cracked bell. You feel too empty and too full at once. Your stomach is soft and strange, no longer taut with the weight of someone else's life. You want to touch it, but you can't lift your hand. Someone wipes your face with a cloth dipped in cool water. It feels good, but you flinch anyway. Everything that touches you now feels like a question. Are you still here? Will you stay? You're not sure how to answer. You can't tell if you're healing or simply waiting to die. Voices come and go. You hear someone say your name. You hear someone else say, rest. You hear the midwife give quiet instructions to boil more water and save the linens that aren't too ruined. You hear someone suggest that you sleep, as if that's something you can choose. Your eyes flutter shut on their own, but the darkness doesn't bring peace, only a thrum of half-formed thoughts and flickering images of everything that just happened. You open them again, slowly, and the candle near the bed is shorter than it was before. There's a sense of relief in the room, but it's cautious. No one declares victory, not yet. You're still here, but just barely, and everyone knows how quickly that can change. Women survive the birth and die days later, from fever, from infection, from too much blood lost and not enough food in their stomachs to rebuild what's gone. You've seen it. You've helped bury them. The baby, if it's still alive, is elsewhere. Someone mentions bringing it to you when you're stronger. Not now, not like this. You don't know whether to be grateful or devastated. You want to see it, to count its fingers and toes, to find proof that it was worth it. But you also want to disappear beneath the covers and never feel anything again. One of the older women rubs your arm in slow circles. She doesn't say anything. She just stays. You're grateful for that, for the silence, for the warmth of her touch. You want to ask her if it gets better, if this part ends. But she wouldn't lie, and you're not ready for the truth. You're still alive. That's the headline, if anyone were writing one. You're still breathing, still bleeding, but slower now. Still trembling, but in a way that suggests your body hasn't completely quit. That counts for something. Maybe not much, but something. And for now, that will have to be enough. At first, it's hard to tell what's wrong. Everything hurts, but of course it does. You've been split open, emptied, stitched together with cloth and prayers. The ache in your limbs, the weight in your chest, the heat crawling over your skin. It all feels like the natural aftermath of survival. For a day or so, people smile when you open your eyes. They whisper that you're lucky. They say you're on the mend. Then the smiles fade. It begins with the heat. You feel flushed beneath the blankets, but no one else in the room seems to think it's warm. Your skin grows slick, sticky with sweat that pools beneath your arms and around your neck. You shift beneath the linens and feel a chill despite the burn. Someone notices. They touch your forehead with the back of their hand and pause too long before pulling it away. Your body begins to betray you again, not with contractions this time, but with something quieter, more sinister. Your legs feel heavier, your thoughts cloud. You find yourself forgetting what day it is, what time it might be. The women try to keep you upright to feed you broth, but you can't swallow more than a mouthful. Even water makes your stomach twist. You try to sit up, and black spots burst across your vision, like ash in the wind. You ask where the baby is. No one answers right away. The room smells wrong now. Not just blood and sweat. Those are familiar. This is something else. Sour, metallic, rotting, though no one says the word aloud. The cloth between your legs is changed more often, and each time the women glance at each other with something like guilt. You can't see the wound. You don't need to. You can feel it. Hot, pulsing, angry beneath the layers. A part of you you'd rather not think about. Your skin begins to turn. First, a greyish cast to your hands. Then bruising that appears without reason, across your chest, your thighs, your ribs. You touch your arm and feel it colder than it should be. The midwife pretends not to notice, or maybe she's just too tired to say what you already know. The candles multiply. Where there was one near the bed, there are now 3, then 5. They say it's for warmth, for light, for prayer. But you've seen this before, the way rooms grow brighter as people slip further away. It's not for your benefit, it's for theirs. They're preparing to see you die. They just haven't admitted it out loud. The whispers start again. They're quieter now, more reverent. Some still think this might be punishment, that the blood loss, the fever, the slow wasting is a sign. Others say it's natural, that the body can only take so much. Either way, they light more candles and murmur behind the door while you drift in and out of lucidity, sweating through your shift and wondering whether anyone has told your husband. And then the priest returns. He arrives with that familiar rustle of robes and damp footsteps, clutching his book like a shield. He doesn't ask how you are. He knows. His words are softer this time, less performative. He doesn't waste time. He sprinkles holy water, touches your forehead, and begins the rites. Not last rites, not officially, but something close, a preemptive blessing. Just in case, he doesn't look you in the eyes. The flies are back. You don't know when they arrived. They hover near the corners of the room, near the basin of used cloths, near the door. Someone waves them away with a fan, but they always return. You can feel one land on your arm and stay there longer than it should. You try to brush it off and find that your hand won't lift. Voices fade in and out. A lullaby, a prayer, the clink of a spoon against an empty bowl. You're too tired to panic. You simply float, as if your body has already decided what's coming, as if the struggle is over and now it's just a matter of time. You don't ask for anything anymore. Not water, not help, not answers. You lie still, listening to the scrape of shoes on the floor and the quiet weeping of someone nearby. You think of the baby, wherever it is. Alive or dead, it no longer feels like part of you. You are your own small world now, one that's dimming, flickering like the last stub of wax melting down. And still, the fever burns. There comes a moment when even the people around you aren't sure if you're still here. You lie motionless, eyes half-lidded, chest rising just enough to suggest breath. They whisper your name, but you don't answer. They press damp cloths to your forehead and listen for signs. Twitching fingers, a soft groan, anything. Some believe you're slipping away. Others say you just need rest. The midwife says nothing at all. If you die, it happens quietly, not dramatically, not with one final gasp or a whispered goodbye, more like the settling of dust, a final exhale that doesn't return. The room doesn't erupt into panic. It just falls silent, as if even the air understands it's over. Someone checks your pulse, finds nothing, and steps back. The others bow their heads. The priest, if he's still there, begins to speak again. Not in blessing now, but in farewell. They wrap you in the shroud you prepared weeks ago, the fabric you folded carefully, the one you touched with trembling hands, while you are still swollen and afraid. It's stained now, but they use it anyway. It's what you wanted. They tie your limbs, close your eyes and carry you out the way. All women are eventually carried. Quiet, still, already being forgotten. You're buried in the churchyard, assuming there's space, assuming no one thought you were a witch, assuming the baby lived long enough to be baptized, and your death wasn't seen as punishment. Your grave might get a cross, it might not. Your name might be written in the parish book, tucked between wedding bands and harvest tallies, or it might not be written down at all. In time, someone else will sleep in your bed, someone else will wear your shawl, your husband might mourn you for a season, especially if the child survives, but he'll remarry. The child will grow or not. You will be mentioned occasionally, usually by women who remember your laughter, or your bread, or your way of braiding hair, then less and less. But maybe, just maybe, you don't die. Maybe your fever breaks, slowly, like dawn after a storm. Your colour returns by degrees. One morning, your eyes open fully and focus. You can hold down broth. You can speak above a whisper. The women let out a collective breath they've been holding for days. The midwife allows herself a tired smile. The priest doesn't come back. There's no ceremony for survival. No bells rung for the living. Your healing is not graceful. It's slow, jagged, uncomfortable. You ache in places you didn't know could ache. You leak, you swell, you bleed, you cry when no one is watching. Your breasts become tender, hot, swollen with milk, even if the baby isn't ready to feed. You're told to be grateful, to smile more, to enjoy the moment. But all you can think about is how much it still hurts. They bring you the baby eventually, swaddled, sleeping, warm against your chest. Maybe it's healthy, maybe it isn't. Maybe it feeds easily, or maybe it doesn't latch at all. If it does, there's a chance you'll develop an infection. If it doesn't, there's a chance it'll starve. Either way, you're responsible. You're already failing or already succeeding, depending on who you ask and what time of day it is. You are congratulated for surviving, quietly, almost awkwardly, as if everyone's relieved but unsure what to do with you now. You were meant to disappear, into death or motherhood, and now that you're still here, still bleeding and breathing and asking questions, you've become inconvenient. You take up space. You require care. You're not done yet, and that's unexpected. And in 2 years, maybe 3, you'll likely be pregnant again. That's the cycle. That's the plan. You've proven you can survive it once, so they'll expect you to do it again. Your body, still healing, still marked with scars and aches, will be asked to stretch and split once more. And next time, maybe you won't be so lucky. So whether you die or don't, the outcome feels almost the same. You're changed, hollowed, grateful in a way that feels more like resignation. Alive, yes, but no longer whole. And everyone around you is already preparing for the next time. Because survival isn't the end of the story. It's just the permission to repeat it. If you die, the village mourns, briefly. They lower their voices when your name comes up. They bring food to your home. Bread, broth, dried fruit wrapped in cloth. The older women sigh when they speak of you. The younger ones glance away. Some cry, especially if they saw you during your pregnancy, if they heard your laughter, if they held your hand before the pain started. Others just nod and say things like, God's will, or she went bravely. The grieving doesn't last long. There's work to do. Fields to tend, animals to feed, mouths to keep alive through the next season. After a week, maybe 2, your name stops being part of the daily rhythm. It becomes a pause, a footnote in conversations about childbirth or misfortune, or the general risks of being alive and female in a world that barely knows how to care for either. Your belongings are sorted quickly. Someone takes your shawl, someone else your boots, if they still fit. The comb with the broken tooth disappears. The little wooden carving you kept beside the bed ends up on a shelf in someone else's house. You aren't robbed exactly. You're redistributed, folded back into the fabric of the village, piece by piece. Your husband remarries within the year. No one judges him for it. It's expected, necessary even. He needs someone to cook, to keep the fire lit, to take care of the child, assuming it survived. Maybe he marries a younger girl. Maybe one of the women who helped clean your body after death. Maybe someone who never knew you at all. They speak kindly of you at first, then less often. The child, if it lives, grows up hearing bits and pieces. That you were kind, that you were brave, that you screamed through the night and bled through the dawn and didn't make it to sunrise. Maybe the midwife tells them that you smiled once right before the end. Maybe she lies just a little to make it easier. Maybe no one tells them anything at all. Your grave is marked with a wooden cross. No name carved into it. Wood is too soft, too precious for such permanence. Just a scrap of linen tied around the post. A flower placed by someone who remembered your voice. The cross will rot in a few years, fall into the soil, be replaced or not. By then, fewer people will remember who it was for. You become a story, a cautionary tale. The one they mention when a girl says she isn't afraid of giving birth. The one who seemed healthy, seemed strong, until she wasn't. You're used as a warning, not out of cruelty, but out of habit. That's how memory works here. It stays sharp only when it's useful. In time, you become more memory than person, more whisper than voice. Your death is woven into the fabric of the village, in the way all things are, absorbed and softened by repetition. The place where you died becomes someone else's room. The midwife uses the same bed to deliver the next child. The same linens, the same prayers. You fade not suddenly, but slowly, like a song that everyone forgets they were humming. You don't leave behind a statue or a journal or a painted portrait. Just a cross in the dirt, a baby that might grow, a man who eventually stops saying your name, and a story that begins, there was a woman once and she was strong, but even that wasn't enough. You are not the only one, not by a long shot. There were so many others, women in cottages, castles, manors and farmhouses, all gripping splintered bed frames or cold stone floors as their bodies tried to force new life into the world. They groaned, they bled, they screamed just like you. Some survived, many didn't. And the difference between those two groups often came down to things no one could see, explain or fix. It wasn't about strength. You were strong. Everyone said so. And it wasn't about virtue. Good women died just as easily as wicked ones. It wasn't about wealth, though the rich sometimes had better linens and more candles. A well-fed woman with a priest on one side and a midwife on the other could still slip into darkness, the same as a peasant girl in a barn. It wasn't about who wanted it more. It was about chance, about bodies no one understood, about luck or lack thereof. They said it was God's will. That phrase covered everything. If the mother lived, it was because God smiled on her. If she died, it was because he called her home. The same was said about the child. A stillbirth meant the soul wasn't meant for this world. A healthy cry meant a blessing. That's how people made sense of it, by assigning divine purpose to what was, in truth, horrifyingly random. The truth no one said aloud, not the priests, not the healers, not even the women who'd done it before, was that childbirth was the most dangerous thing a woman could do in medieval Europe. More dangerous than famine, more dangerous than plague, more dangerous in many cases than war. And yet, it was expected, required, praised. It was your duty to try, regardless of the cost. Midwives did what they could. Some were knowledgeable, experienced, and even respected. Others were barely tolerated, treated like sorceresses when things went wrong, and invisible when they didn't. They passed on what they knew from memory and muscle. They watched dozens of births, tried to learn from them, and hoped the next one wouldn't end with a woman going still beneath their hands. They didn't have the tools. They didn't have the science. They had roots, cloth, prayer, and hope. Physicians, those who called themselves that, were often worse. Male, proud, confident in theories that involved balancing humours and fumigating wombs. Most had never attended a live birth. Some had never seen a woman unclothed, but they wrote the books and preached the methods and sometimes advised the very women they'd never dare to help in person. They made rules. They rarely followed them. And the women, your sisters, your mothers, your neighbours, they suffered quietly or loudly. It didn't change the outcome. They braced for the pain, prepared their shrouds, and whispered to their unborn children. They took the herbs, they drank the teas, they believed the signs and the omens and the old midwife's dream. Some tried not to hope, so the loss would be easier. It rarely was. If you survived, you carried the trauma in your bones. Every twinge, every ache, a reminder of how close it came. If the baby survived, you prayed you wouldn't lose it in the weeks to come. To fever, to feeding, to the 100 invisible threats waiting in the air. If both of you made it, you were called lucky. No one asked how you felt about what you'd endured. Survival was reward enough. And if you didn't survive, you became a number, an example, a warning, a story passed down in kitchens and whispered between labour pains. You were remembered, but only until someone else died more dramatically, or until the midwife couldn't keep your name separate from the others she'd lost. That's the part no one likes to dwell on. The sheer volume, the steady drumbeat of loss. 1 in 5 in some places, 1 in 3 in others. More if you were poor, more if the baby was large, more if the weather turned or the midwife was late, or the priest said the wrong prayer. You are not alone in your suffering. You never were. The path you walked has been worn smooth by generations of women before you, most of whom were just as terrified, just as brave, just as forgotten. They did it anyway. You did it anyway. And that, they said, was what made it holy. That's the end of tonight's slow descent into the quiet horrors of medieval childbirth, torn flesh, fever dreams, and all. Thanks for lying down with me in more ways than one. If you're still awake, feel free to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what moment would have sent you over the edge. The mildew-soaked linens, the priest mumbling about Eve, or the part where nobody really knew if you'd live or die. Sleep well, survivor. You made it further than most ever did.